You are listening to Hit Play, Not Pause, a feisty menopause podcast for active, performance-minded women. I am your host, Selene Yeager. Each week, I bring you advice from athletes, scientists, researchers, and other experts to help you feel and perform your best, no matter what your hormones are doing. This show is a production of Live Feisty Media. Hello, strong, feisty women. So as many of you know, I waded back into the triathlon waters last month at the Ironman 70.3 Pennsylvania Happy Valley event. The half-distance Ironman was based in State College, which is the home of Penn State, where I went to school, and we got to finish by running through the tunnel at Beaver Stadium, which, for those who don't know, is ginormous. It holds like 110,000 people for real. And not that it was packed for our event, but it was still really pretty electric. We got to finish up on the 50-yard line while they broadcast our image on the big Jumbotron. And it was just a very, very special finish line. And if I'm honest, being at my alma mater and that really cool finish was a big part of what inspired me to dive back into swim, bike, run after 15 years away from it. And I knew when I signed up that I was going to need a coach to do it right. Because if I tried to coach myself, I would get impatient and probably push myself too far, too early, especially in the run where you're more likely to get injured. So I contacted Erin Carson, who has been on our show. She trains many high level triathletes. And we have had her do her amazing mobility sessions in our Level Up membership, and I just love her. So called her up and I said, hey, do you know anyone good? I'm doing this thing again. And she connected me immediately to Marni Sumbal of Trimarni Coaching and Nutrition. And holy shit, what an amazing coaching experience. I did my strength and mobility work through Erin Carson's EC Fit, which I highly recommend. Her mobility sessions are second to none. And Marni prescribed all of my swim, bike, run workouts. And I not only thoroughly enjoyed the process, but also never felt so much as an ache or a niggle during the 7 months that we worked together. And really the best part is that I felt like a 3-sport athlete again. Running was a joy, and I got that feeling for the water when you actually know what you're doing while you're swimming. And it was just, and I'm still running and I'm still swimming, and that was the point. I wanted to get back to feeling multidimensional again as an athlete. So, I always encourage women and men for that matter to work with a coach when they have a big goal, because it can make such a difference. And I think it's even more impactful during this time of life when our risk for injury can rise and our training and recovery needs change. So I thought it might be insightful to pull back the curtain and talk about what the process looked like with Marni this week. And as you'll hear, I think the most important factor is finding someone who listens to you and really gets you. It makes all the difference. Marni is multifaceted. She's an author, she's a board certified sports dietitian, master of science in exercise and physiology, a 19-time Ironman finisher, and 5-time Ironman World Championship finisher. She was 5th in her age group in the 2021 Ironman World Championships in St. George. And in 2017 at Ironman Chattanooga, she was the overall female amateur, which is a long way of saying she really knows her stuff. And you can hear how passionate she is about the sport and has so much insightful wisdom. So I hope you enjoy this one as much as I did. You can learn more about her and her work at trimarnicoach.com. I will link that in the show notes so you can check it out. All right, before we get to it, as always, please check us out on Instagram and Facebook at Feisty Menopause. Sign up for that free weekly menopause blog I put out each and every week at feistymenopause.com. You can learn more about our Level Up Menopause membership, where we have people like Erin Carson come in and talk to us every month. And remember, you can always send me voicemail questions at our SpeakPipe webpage, and that's in the show notes as well. All right, before we get to it, very quick thanks to Previnex for their longtime support. I get the most amazing reviews for their Joint Health Plus product, which I 100% swear by. And in this one, Tammy says, the balm active people have been waiting for. I severely sprained my thumb and it didn't seem to be healing. After taking Joint Health Plus for a week, it was back to normal. Made me a convert right away. Now I've been taking it off and on for about 6 months, and my daily aches and pains I was getting in my joints have diminished more than I ever expected. I'm a runner, cyclist, and weightlifter, so I have a lot. I've even got my mom hooked on Joint Health Plus. Great stuff. Can't say it better than that, Tammy. And thank you, Previnex, for your continued support from pretty much the beginning. All right, enough of me. Let's have a few words about our awesome sponsors and get on with the show. Okay, Marni, I'm very excited to do this show with you. When we first started this, like that was in the back of my mind, in my pocket. And I think I did share with you, I'm like, at the end of this, I think we should definitely do a show about the process because it was pretty cool.
Yeah, I enjoyed sharing the journey with you. I've said that so many times because I really feel like it was a journey and it was a true progression of what am I getting myself into? Like, not me as the coach, but I
But
felt like
maybe you as the coach.
for you, the athlete, what am I getting myself into? I want to do this, but I'm not sure. And so managing the emotions and expectations and the process. So I felt like it was a journey, and that's what coaching is all about. It's a relationship that you're building, and it involves a lot of communication and trust and being able to hear one another and being able to voice your concerns and thoughts. And you were a great athlete to coach, so that made my job a lot easier.
What do you mean by that?
Well, like I said, coaching is a relationship. It's a dialogue, so it involves two people. And I felt that you trusted me and you believed in the process. I'm not against asking, like questioning me, but you questioned it in a way of, is this right for me? And can I do things differently? Should I not? Without saying it in that way, it was just, I think I need this. And then I would voice my concerns or statements. Sure, that's a great idea. Or, we really should be focusing on this instead. And that's what coaching is all about. It has to be a dialogue. You know your body the best, but also with my experience, I also need to know what's best for you, the athlete. So it was just a great process to share with you. And you were a great athlete to coach because you were very disciplined. You were very dedicated to the training. And also you come from an athlete background. So you have that template to work with. And so I knew what your body would be able to handle. We just needed to do it in a way that you stayed healthy and enjoyed the process.
Yeah, and I definitely want to dig into all of that because I told and I told you this, and I told anyone who would listen, like I loved your coaching. Like I've been coached a lot, and I love coaching, period. I mean, I tell anybody that if you really do want to get the best of yourself, get a coach. Even if you are a coach. I have been a coach. I have a
Yeah.
trainer. I know what to do. I can write my own plans. It's not, you will never coach yourself as well as somebody else will coach you ever, period. End of
Yep.
sentence, right? Like that's just the way it is. But I would like to talk about some of those first impressions
Yeah.
because um so to give people who may not have caught on to this journey when I started it, let me backtrack. So I did triathlon many moons ago. It's been 15 years now. I was a mountain bike racer, and then I did triathlon just because everybody was doing it. It was sort of that late 90s, early, like
Hmm.
it was in the air and like, oh, it sounds really fun. It felt like recess. I'm like, oh, we're going to swim and then we're going to jump on our bikes. And now we're going to, like, it was just so fun. And I really enjoyed it. And then at some point I saw an article in Triathlete magazine, like I would have written like 16 weeks to Ironman. And I'm like, I can do 16 weeks, but I didn't know how to swim really. I knew how to not to drown. And I didn't understand any. I was like looking at hieroglyphics. I didn't understand any of the swim workouts that they had in the
Hmm.
program. So I reached out to a couple that They were married at the time, and he was a triathlon coach, an Ironman coach specifically. She was a swim coach. I reached out to her first, and she was like, happy to teach you. She's like, but my husband Craig, he's an Ironman coach, and you could hire both of us. I was like, oh, okay. And I sent him over like all my mountain bike results and all this stuff, and he's like, you could qualify for Kona with your bike times. And I was like, I don't really want to hear that, Craig. Like now we're on 16 weeks to Ironman,
Yeah.
and we literally, like we were on 10 months to Ironman, and I won my age group in Louisville, and I went to Kona 6 weeks later, and then I was like, I'm never doing this again. I just like I just it wasn't that didn't like it. There was no motivation anymore, and I got picked up by a mountain bike team, and that was a great thing.
Mhm.
But I was reading my newspaper, and yes, I still get my newspaper because I know people that work there and I want to support them. And they had a Happy Valley 70.3 at Penn State with a finish line on the 50-yard line of Beaver Stadium. And I'm a Penn State alum, and you're not allowed to even look at the 50. Like, you can look at it, but nobody goes into the stadium ever. It's not an open stadium. And I was just like, oh, that sounds cool. And in the back of my mind, I'd been sort of banging around, like I missed feeling like a runner. I was starting to feel pretty one or two dimensional, just riding all the time. I'm not one to say junk miles, but I was just starting to feel like motions, just going through motions. And it
There's no
wasn't really,
purpose.
yeah, it wasn't really doing anything for me except, you know, the nice things of getting fresh air and whatever. And that's great. So I literally just signed up that day. I was like, I can get in shape for a 70.3. I'll never do another full. I don't like running on the pavement enough to do another marathon, but a 70.3 sounds like a fun goal that is doable, but I do need a coach, because I have not run that far that long, and I don't want to try to put all together these puzzle pieces for myself. And Aaron Carson hooked us up, and I sent you this whole thing, talking about my journey, and that I was really concerned about, I didn't want to get back into that headspace of performance because I had spent like a lot of time getting very wrapped up in podiums and getting very wrapped up, like when I raced with Rebecca Rush, it was important that we got, I mean, that was her livelihood, right? And the pressure of that is a lot. And I short, I was out of balance in that my family sort of suffered for that. And like a lot of things suffered for that. And I knew there was a time limit on it. And then I have found this wonderful balance. And I was very like, anything that you felt from me was like, I don't want to get that far out of balance again. I was very, very concerned about that. And I also just want to put all this energy into my podcast and all this other stuff. So I just dumped all that on you. I don't even know if I told you how old I was. I'm not even sure what I told you. But I'm curious, like with all of that and all of that I laid at you, like what were your first thoughts?
Yeah, I knew of you from your very experienced athlete and writer and podcast and everything that you do. So I know of you on that level, but I didn't know you as a human. And I really appreciated that you reached out in October and not just, 12, 16 weeks before the event, which was in July, so that we had time to build that relationship and I could get to know you. And that is really important when it comes to having a good coach athlete relationship is you need time, and I needed time to get to know you. Even though you wrote down who you are as an individual, I need to really know you and your life and how you function and how you think and how your body reacts to the training. And plus, knowing that you weren't coming from a triathlon background for the past 15 years, it was very important that I build you up very gradually, especially with the swim and the run, because there's a lot of overuse injuries that can occur if we just ramp things up. So I needed time for that, and then also time to know how your body was going to react to that training. So I feel like your intro was really helpful. And I think it's important for athletes to interview different coaches, talk about yourself, don't hide anything about yourself, because the coach is not just coaching the athlete, it's coaching the human. And it was important to you that you had that balance. And even though I'm a performance focused coach, like I would think that many coaches are, I think that there's a difference between being competitive from it being feeling like it's a job, it's an obsession, there's specific outcome goals, training and racing becomes pass or fail, and that is definitely a recipe for burnout, but and injury. but you can still be competitive if you care. And that was important to me, is that we get to a place where you care about getting fit, prepared, and enjoying this process. So in my mind, I wanted you to be competitive, but that you are competitive because you care about what you're doing and there's purpose to what you're doing. So it was finding that right balance where it didn't cross over to obsession, but that you stay passionate about what you're doing with your body.
100%. And I didn't want to, because I can put a lot of self-imposed pressure on myself and feel like there would be times in the pool when my heart wasn't really in it, and I'm like, you can't disappoint her. She's going to be looking at your thing, like, and it was an internal struggle within myself. I was like, why am I doing this? Do I care? And there were definitely times, we can talk about that, which that came later. That came sort of like in the no man's land of this, where I'm like, not in the beginning where everything was fresh and new, and not towards the end where everything made sense, but sort of in the middle, I was like, what am I doing? Like, why is this important to me? I mean, it took a long time to find my why again. And I posted about that, and we'll talk about it, because I did find my why. But it was really interesting to go through all the stages um of emotion that you go through, I think, as any athlete, trying to figure out like what you're doing and what the purpose of all this is. Especially
Yeah.
when it's not fun, when you're just like, this isn't actually fun for me today. This isn't what I'm feeling like I want to be doing. I don't want to be doing 3,000 meters in the pool today. Like, that was
Yeah.
the only time, honestly, that it wasn't fun sometimes. But before we get to that, you did note it. Like, were you most concerned about injury for me?
Yeah, and I th I believe that a lot of athletes, when they sign up for a half Ironman, that they're very focused on building endurance because, I mean, it's 70 miles, and for the average athlete, it's gonna take them between 5.5 to 7 hours. That's a long time, longer than anything else that you would train for, and the distances can feel overwhelming for a lot of athletes, and it's very easy to just focus on building endurance. But I personally believe in building strong and resilient athletes. And in order to do that, we need to focus on ways to get you and keep you strong. And not just in the mind, but also muscles and joints and tendons. And so loading you is in a proper way was very important in progressing you, but also the specificity of the workouts and how they were designed also enabled you to feel stronger as you progressed. And also we did a lot of intensity with the working out and or with the training, and I feel that that also, those things together can help athletes prepare for this endurance event. But really keeping you healthy, you're not going to enjoy the journey if you're injured or getting
Mhm.
sick all the time. So you're going to have more fun when you're healthy and you can do awesome things with your body. So finding ways to keep you healthy, which you didn't have any setbacks during the entire, maybe just a little allergy flare up, but that's it. But
Yeah, but that's that's just
other than
spring in
that, you
Pennsylvania.
were healthy through the whole time. Again, I think it's on my part, good programming, but your part, good communication.
Yeah, and you had noted sort of right out of the gate, I mean, before we even started, that doing, Erin Carson, who I've had on the show, did connect us. And then she shared with me, her EC Fit, you know, programming that we integrated into my Training Peaks. And you had mentioned, like you said, quote, doing Erin's EC Fit workouts will be really important to reduce risk of injury getting back into running. What specifically about that do you think is helpful?
I really like Erin Carson's mobility. I mean, she has so much experience, so she knows what she's doing. And even for myself as an athlete, I have noticed that I stay healthy and I perform better with the mobility. And the reason for that is a body that moves better can perform better and can accept load better. And we in your training and how I coach our athletes, we do a lot of strength work. We're doing paddles in the pool, we're doing big gear work, we're doing hills, we're doing a lot of strength-based work. So we don't need to necessarily do that in the gym, although I'm a big fan of it and I think it's good. But for what I felt would work best for you is if we can keep you mobile and keep with functional or purposeful mobility and movement so that your brain can communicate better with your body and that it primes you for these upcoming cardio workouts, because we don't need to add more cardio, we don't need to add more training. We're trying to work with your available time. So if you can move better and feel better during your workouts, then that is going to allow for better consistency, which will then help with training adaptations. So the mobility is really important. I think a lot of athletes, they skip their warm up or they rush into the workout. They're sitting a lot like yourself, very hunched over or on the computer. And if you bring that to a workout, your body's not going to perform as well. Plus, I also think what's great about the mobility, especially when you do it before you start a cardio session, is it allows you to get in tune with your body. It allows you to say, my right hip is a little tight today, or, I'm not feeling very well balanced and I have something in my neck, or, wow, this was very exhausting for me and it shouldn't be. So you then can bring a sense of control to that workout by identifying what could be potential weaknesses for this workout, or what do you need to focus on to help you so that you don't get injured. So it gives a lot of body awareness or intuition if you're present during that mobility session.
Yeah, 100%. And what she also does that I like quite a bit is that her programming is a lot about being able to fully access your muscles. I mean, she uses that language quite a bit.
Yep.
And, if you're running on your bike or whatever, and you don't have your hips are locked up and you don't have full access to your glutes and your other muscles, then you're just not going to you're going to use more energy, more likely to get hurt, not going to get the most out of yourself. And
Yep.
I've done her stuff before. It's quite simple and it's easy to be like, why am I doing this? It's
Right.
easy to be to have that, but it really does make a big
Yep.
difference. And to your point, that like that's one of the things that I like about it too, is I can feel like when, and it does tend to be my right hip that gets a little sticky, and then I just give it that much more attention, and it just
Yep.
stops you from ignoring something that down the road, maybe 3-4 months, who knows, could turn into something.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I really enjoyed that. I sometimes would, I would cut corners here and there on it. I have to be honest, because I like some of it was like a 50-minute foundation workout. I'm like, I don't know if I want to do all that, but I always did like the stuff that I knew worked for me, like that I kept in, and I really appreciated she would have. It was a day that she had like, I don't know what kind of yoga it was, but it was basically just lie on the floor with a bunch of pillows.
Pillows. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
like my husband's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "My workout."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So let's go into the pool. I never swam with that many toys in my life. Like I was just like snorkels and buoys and straps and paddles and um do you do that with everybody? Do you have that kind of apparatus with all your swimmers?
Yeah, so we call them toys. So lots of toys. We use the snorkel, we use ankle straps, or we found that just putting the buoy between the ankles and then wrapping it up with the ankle strap can be effective, or more effective than just the strap. Kickboards, fins, and then the Finnis agility paddles. So a specific type of paddle. So we use a lot of toys when we're swimming, and there's a few reasons for it. And then also we're big. I'm a big proponent of buoyancy shorts, like from Roka, that are kind of like the shorts version of a wetsuit as well. And for a lot of triathletes, they don't come from a swimming background. I come from a swimming background. I've been swimming for over 30 years, and I know I feel more comfortable in the water than on the land. So when I get in the water, I know how to hold myself in the water. I know what good body position feels like. I know what bad body position feels like. I know how to move myself forward in a very efficient way without exerting a lot of energy. I have multiple speeds in the pool. And these are all things that I strive for triathletes to acquire. But in order to do that, we need to accomplish a few things. Number one is you need to know how to have good body position, how to have good tautness, how to have good alignment, how to have good propulsion. And unfortunately, with swimming, it is such a skill based sport, and you don't really know what you're doing wrong unless you have somebody watching you with experience or you see yourself on camera. And then it's hard to make those changes. So the nice thing with the toys is it can give you awareness of what you should be feeling. And then when you remove those toys, it then allows you to try to feel that same thing. So, as an example, when you have the snorkel on, good alignment. So, keeping your head straight, you don't have to turn your head to breathe. You can then pay attention. Am I crossing my arms? What's happening when I am turning my head to breathe, and how is my body then changing? Am I noodling in the water? Am I not catching the water or entering properly? The buoy, a lot of athletes say, I swim so much better with the buoy. Well, because you're lifted up. And so that's that tautness or that core. So they're not they shouldn't be used as band-aids that the only way you can get through a swim is putting fins on and a snorkel. We want to use the fins for ankle flexibility and to feel that fluidity. We use the ankle strap with the buoy at the ankles so that you are forced to only use your arms. And how do I move myself through the water with only my arms? So all of these toys are very effective, but they also can be effective when you need to swim easier. And that's important. If swimming always costs a lot of energy, then there's no easy days. And swimming is a great therapeutic tool to relax the body and to move blood without being weight bearing. So putting on the buoyancy shorts, putting on the snorkel, I often do a lot of my warming up with the buoy or the snorkel just so I can ease into it and kind of feel the water, but not worry so much about technique, just get that warm up. So the toys can be really helpful. And then we progress to a point where either we're doing intensity with the toys, which then can serve as a different a component, using the paddles for strength or using the ankle strap for strength. But then we'll get to a point too where hopefully we can use and do no toys and accomplish the same thing. But we also know that if you, the athlete, starts to feel like your form is being compromised, you then know which toy you can put on for maybe a 50 or 100 to reset and then get back to normal swimming again.
Yeah, and it's funny how you do really feel that when you go from, like, working on the form with it and then take it away. It's like, "Oh, okay, like, this is what it should be feeling like." I mean, I could definitely feel that connection, and I will say, and I know I'm not alone, for the people who find, like, swimming at some point to be boring, because it's so repetitive, it definitely is a mental relief. Like, there's no question that there's a mental relief that happens. It's like, "Oh, cool. I'm gonna be doing something a little different and with some other intention." And it's a nice mind engagement for those who, like myself, just struggle with, like, long sets in the pool.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't really believe in I think that there can be a place for the long sets, but for athletes like yourself who are trying to build that familiarity and technique and endurance in the pool, you're better off doing a lot of short stuff, which I know you weren't a huge fan of 20, lots of 25s and lots of 50s because you would lose count and it was very
I
repetitive.
like them, but yeah, I couldn't keep track of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that can be very good because number one, You're always going to have the best form when you push off the wall, when you have that
Right.
tautness and streamline. And especially if athletes don't do a flip turn, you're going to have that opportunity to really be powerful off the wall and feel that tautness for a few strokes. So doing 25s or 50s and having that rest in between can be very effective. It also allows you to not have that form breakdown throughout, so that you can actually start to feel different efforts and different speeds. So even though we did get to a place where we're doing 300s, 400s, 500s eventually, and sometimes, but we did a lot of less than 100 and also different sets, so that you can just focus on one set at a time without feeling overwhelmed by the magnitude of swimming 3,000 plus yards. I mean, you were swimming can on a week that you could swim 3 times a week, dependent on travel. And then also you have to reserve lanes where you are and pay
Yeah.
for that. So, there's a lot of things kind of making it logistically tough to swim. But when you were swimming 3 times a week, you were getting between 8 and 10,000 yards a week. So that's a good number. Even when you were swimming just 2 times, you were still getting between 5 and 6,000. So we want that consistency, that familiarity. You want to keep a good feel for the water, and you were able to do that just by getting in the pool a lot.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, like, it felt like I was actually if there was one thing that surprised me, it was looking and seeing at some points, like, a number of 3,000 plus yard swims. I was just like, "Oh my god, that's a lot." I mean, and then I would see a 4 sometimes, like, we'd get, like, a 4,000 yard, and it felt like, "Oh boy, here we go. It's gonna be a long time of going back and forth in the pool." I mean, once the lakes opened up and I could get in the open water, it was a whole other ball of because that I very much enjoy that. Like, that opens up my mind, and I'm great. But, I mean, is there for someone doing, because I know some people don't necessarily do that kind of volume training for a half. I mean, were you doing that in the pool just because when you get out in the open water, you want to have all that yardage from the pool?
I find from my experience with coaching that athletes, there's kind of two camps. One is the swim is the shortest duration of volume and time in a half Ironman. And I feel that a lot of athletes don't take it seriously. Like, once I'm done with the swim, then I can focus on the race. Once I get through the swim,
Right.
plus, swimming is not logistically easy. You have to jump in a cold pool, take off your clothes before, drive somewhere. It takes a lot of time to do an hour workout. And then you've got this stress of dealing with pool lanes and times. And, it's a tough sport to do. And that also then can make it tough for athletes then to swim often. So you've got some that just don't like to swim or don't think it's beneficial. You've got some that are like, well, I'm not really improving, so why bother? And then you've got some that it's really challenging. And then you've got some like myself who just love to swim. And so people get into those different categories, or some that don't love to swim but know that they have to swim a lot. I really want triathletes, and this is around the all of our athletes that I coach. We want our athletes to be very swim fit. It's very important for a few reasons. Number one is the most triathlon deaths and DNFs happen in the swim. So swimming should be taken very seriously. And everything I mentioned before, with it being a skill and technique based sport, that you need to be in the water frequently. I want my athletes to be in the water at least once every 3 days, so they can keep a feel of the water. It's like anything: gymnastics, mountain biking, any skill based sport, rock climbing. You need to feel what you're doing, and then you bring that to the next session. But if there's a long gap between swims, you forget, and then you spend that whole next swim trying to feel it again. So I want my athletes to be really swim fit when they're going into a race. And I want them to have that endurance and that stamina and that ability to know how to move themselves through the water efficiently. And I mean, everybody wants a faster time. They want to improve, but the run is where people remember it the most. But you can gain a lot in the swim. And even if you're not seeing huge gains in terms of times. I mean, I've been swimming for 30 years. If I drop a second, I'm happy. When you're a newer swimmer, you get those big gains, but you have to work really hard, for those small little gains. And some days you don't feel good and you don't have it, and other days you do. But even if you're not seeing significant gains, if you can start the bike fresher and not as
Yes.
exhausted, that's where you're going to gain a lot. I remember when my husband Karel, he comes from a cycling background, spent all his life racing, came from a Cat 1 racing bike ground, started into triathlons. And I remember one workout specifically where we swam and we were going to bike after. It was the first time he'd ever done that. Someone who's a fantastic cyclist, no problem, can ride any bike any time of the day. He's at home on two wheels. We swam, he got on the bike, he could barely make it a few miles. He was totally spent. And, most triathletes in programming don't swim before they bike in training. So it is something that's not very familiar when it comes to race day. But you can just imagine how exhausted a lot of athletes are when they swim, and then they expect to be fresh on the bike or fueled and hydrated and ready to race. So the more prepared you are and the more swim fit you are, just the better experience you're going to have from a health, a performance standpoint.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that was that's why I hired a swim coach. I mean, it was going to do an Ironman. I needed a swim coach, but I would get out of the water very close to the end, and which is okay, but I would be like, I had burned so much energy because literally I was just not drowning.
Yeah.
I'll never forget my swim coach's look on her face when she first observed me swim. Like, it was definitely like, wow, we have a lot of work ahead of us.
Yeah.
But like learning that technique, I mean, all of a sudden I just got out of the water, and I felt warmed up. I felt like, oh,
Right.
I'm so ready to go without like, and it's night and day. I mean, it is
Yeah.
100%. I mean, if someone hasn't gotten a swim coach and they feel like they don't know the technique or they're always tired, it's so worth it.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, just
And
for
you
that
you
alone.
you progressed really well, and that made me really happy too to hear how you were enjoying the swim workouts. And also I think it teaches you, the athlete, a lot about being uncomfortable, because racing is not comfortable, and you have to take the whole sport seriously, not just your favorite discipline. And we all love to do things that we're good at. I remember when I was in graduate school getting my master's in exercise physiology, I loved to study things that I knew. I hated studying things that were hard or I couldn't retain. So I would always gravitate, let me just read this chapter again because it makes me feel good that I know this information. And we're the same way as athletes, right? We put off, we dread, we don't, some athletes do gravitate towards, this is my weakness, and I want to be better. But a lot of athletes just say, well, I'm not good at it. It's no fun. It's hard. I'm not going to do it, or I'm not going to take it seriously. And I think that speaks a lot about the athlete, that if you can get to a place where you are not afraid of failure, that you know that it's a weakness of yours, but you embrace it and you're really committed to self improvement, that says a lot about you as an athlete. And also, I think you're going to then take that to the race, or your entire triathlon or sport journey. And you're going to keep improving because you're disciplined and you're dedicated to, making those improvements and putting in the work.
And it was just honestly fun to look forward to the swim. I mean, I was
Yeah.
psyched. I got there and it was like, this is going to be really fun. I enjoy open water swimming, and it was nice to get, and we'll talk about this in a second with the running, but the same thing happened with the swim. I remembered that little click that happened when people would always talk about feeling the water, and I'm like, what do they mean? And
Hmm.
then I was like, oh, when you can feel the water, and you can feel like when you're really pulling and working with the water, instead of against it, it's a really cool sensation. So I just enjoyed it for that. Like, I enjoyed knowing, like, lining up that morning, I'm like, I'm very excited. I mean, this is exciting to get into this big lake and swim to all these different buoys. I mean, it just feels like play to me, and I actually really do enjoy that
That's
part of
great
it.
to hear. Yeah.
Yeah. But of all the transformations, like, the running really made me the happiest. Because I do like running. I'm not I'm definitely a cyclist. I'm built like a bike rider, I have that. I mean, that's just my main identity and my main sport, but there's something about running I very much enjoy. I tend to run on the trails. I don't tend to run on the road. But I had been so hit or miss with it, and I would literally go like 9 months, sometimes without running at all. And there was at some point, the first couple of longer runs that I did, I was like, "Oh, here we go." And I did spend a lot of that time in your head where I'm like, "Don't look at the watch. You don't want to know like that you've only been out here 7 minutes," right? Like because it
Yeah.
feels like it's been so much longer.
Yep.
But then there was this point where I was just like, I have 90 minutes and I'm really looking forward to this, and I feel like I could run all day, and that was what I was looking for, like, that little turning point, and that happened. It took a while, I'll be honest, it took maybe until about a month out, from my that I really made that, like, I feel like a runner now, and this is amazing. Um, we started with a lot of hill work, and sometimes even, like, walking or marching up hills, and what was your method there? Because it definitely worked. I never had a niggle, I never had anything feel even close to being in any injurious way. I mean, it was really just mostly, like, mentally just, "Okay, just get through this," but, like, once I love the hill work always, like, the hill work always, and then at some point, like, all the long runs just became enjoyable, and now I'm still doing them, and it's just, like, so nice to feel like I can run for enjoyment, and my mind wanders like it does when I'm on my bike.
Yeah. The thing that I want a lot of triathletes to take away, endurance triathletes, is that in order to feel prepared for the distance, or to get yourself faster, which I think everybody wants to be a faster runner off the bike, is it's not the game of being faster from speed. It's being good at not slowing down. And oh, many athletes will think that they need to either just do long distances or they need to do speed work, and that's the recipe to prepare. And while both of those are fine and can be included, that when it comes to speed work on the ground or the flat
Like a
pavement
track.
and the track, that you create the propulsion in order to get your heart rate up. So it requires a lot of force for your body for what I would say is a minimal output, that it's so hard to get that heart rate up. You have to run so hard or with so much propulsion to get your heart rate up. But you get on a hill, you even just walk on a hill, the heart rate comes up, and it's safer for the joints. It's safer for with your stride. You have a shorter stride, you're not going to overstride. And yes, running downhill can cause some risk for injury, but for the most part, hills is such a safe way to get your heart rate up. So we did speed work. It just looked differently. We did it on the hills, and that was a great way to build strength, resiliency, and to to accomplish what we needed to accomplish, but in a more productive way. But with your progression with running, which I think every athlete should appreciate, is there needs to be steps, and every athlete is different. And for you, someone who has great cardio fitness, I mean, you can knock out 9, 10 hour rides, you have very strong endurance, but I needed to make sure that your body could withstand the pounding, and that your brain could communicate with your running legs and move you forward in an efficient way. And to do that, the first thing was just to enjoy running, frequent running, and to run often and not a lot. So a few miles, sometimes off the bike, and just get you accumulating mileage over a course of a week, rather than just seeing this is your long run, this is your hard run, this is your easy run. It was just, let's get some mileage to start getting your body used to the pounding. Then the next thing we would do is we incorporated more strides for that neuromuscular activation, the brain communicating with the posterior chain and just kind of waking up the body. We'd often do those in the middle of the workout or at the end of the workout. And also, I think it brings a little bit more structure to the workout. You have something to focus on. Sometimes we would do them on hills at the end. So we started to incorporate the strides. And then we once I felt like your body was stronger, we did some hill walking, which is great in the winter time. Normally athletes would be on the treadmill, but you prefer to be outside. So the treadmill is a very suitable option. It strengthens the glutes. It allows you to control your core. You can even wear a weight vest if you don't have any neck or spine issues. So it just teaches you how to move your body forward from a strength purpose, building that strength. And so you did it outside, which was just fine. So we did some hill walking. And then we started to incorporate some hills, running up hills or rolling hills to add that strength component and work on some of those muscles for downhill running as well and strengthen the feet. And then eventually we got to a place where you had the fitness. Now let's do something with it. Let's focus on pacing. Let's see how you internalize different efforts now that you have those different efforts, now that you know how to run easy, you know how to run hard, you've got a tempo rhythm. Now show me that you can then pace yourself, which will be very important in the 70.3. Show me that you have an easy, moderate, and hard intensity. And what does that feel like when you're fatigued? What does that feel like in the heat? What does it feel like in the wind? Show me that you can do something with your body and you know how to pace yourself. So it was a gradual progression, but I was also always working with you in your communication. So the coaching was never, here's my plan for you and you have to do it. It was, how is she adapting, and then how can I progress from that? So it wasn't just looking at the training file, it was also looking at your comments, what you liked, what was difficult. Of course, I'm going to give you things that you found difficult because we're going to get better at them. And of course, if you don't like something, that doesn't mean I'm not going to give it to you. If I feel like it's beneficial, we'll just find a way for me to communicate why it's important. So it was a gradual progression, but I was really happy with the running, and then also how you enjoyed that running progression as well.
Yeah, I really did. I loved it. And I never looked at my watch. Like I did all of that by feel, which was my watch would beep, and that's what I like about like when it upgrades to like it goes to my my watch, my Wahoo watch. So it would just like give me a little haptic buzz when it was time to like do another interval, and I would glance at it just to see like, oh, 30 seconds of this, and then it would
Mhm.
buzz. But I did all the pacing by feel because I just feel like that's most productive. I mean, that's just how I go. But I really did, it would be very satisfying to me to see myself like, oh, I was able to sort of like maintain all those different efforts by just going by like intuitively how this is supposed to feel.
No. And the job of the coach, even though there is a purpose of giving some workouts that are kind of designed for failure, just to kind of push the athlete and see. I wouldn't necessarily do those with running, more so with
Yeah.
biking because it's a little bit safer. But I'm giving you workouts that I know you can do. It's just how you go about it. And some workouts may look scary on paper, like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this, but I'm giving it to you because I believe in you and I know that you can accomplish it in a safe way. Then my job is to review and to say, okay, well, you were, there was hard efforts and there were easy efforts, but your heart rate was the same the whole time. So clearly
Right.
you were going too hard at times or you weren't taking the easy. So, that was my feedback back to you. And then in my head, I say, okay, well, maybe we need to work on some different workouts, or maybe I need to specify something differently. Like you need to walk after this. You can't
Right.
just jog. So I would then adapt from that previous session. So I think it's important for the athlete that, I'm giving you workouts that you should be able to do. It's just how you go about completing them.
Yeah. Yeah. I will say, moving on to the bike, which we haven't talked much about, kind of ironically, but that
Yeah.
is my sport.
Yep.
I was actually, it's funny, for the shakeout Olympic distance triathlon I did, I don't know how far out that was, maybe 6, 7 weeks or something like that. I was really nervous about the bike. Like ironically, really nervous because I hadn't mentally given it much space in my
Mhm.
mind because it's just sort of what I do, but it was ego-y important to me, like I wanted to do well, and I was like, "What if I don't do well on the bike? Oh, it's gonna suck." And I was surprised. I felt I crushed the bike. I mean, I did it so well, and I was just like, "Oh, that felt so good." It was just like glimmers of sort of how I remembered how that felt 15 years ago, to be in a triathlon and just like feeling like I'm flying on the bike. Um, I feel like it wasn't our biggest focus, and maybe that's just my own perceptive because it wasn't my biggest focus. And there was definitely times that I didn't listen to you as much on the bike, like doing a 9-hour ride when you're like, 3, or if you feel better, you can go longer. And I was just like,
That was
"How's
classic.
130 miles?" But,
Yep.
you seem to have confidence in me there, I imagine, that
Yeah. I mean, I knew your background and, we want to build off your strengths. So it would be a mistake to just have you, okay, do whatever you want. You've got bike fitness, right? We
yeah,
want to build from that. But also, your background, or at least over the last 15 years, wasn't triathlon focused. So there were specific things that we need to accomplish so that what you do on the bike is going to transfer over to good running as well. And again, going back to our earlier in our conversation, we did a lot of high intensity work, a lot of on off intervals. But the
yeah,
great thing is that you like to ride outside. There's only one time you're on the rollers. Most of our athletes are going to have a combination of trainer workouts and outdoor workouts. And of course, the trainer workouts are easier to accomplish these specific workouts. But what I would do for you is I'd either give you a file of a workout and then you would kind of have the liberty to adjust it based on the terrain, or I would just say include this in your ride so that we
yeah,
had some specificity. But then there was a lot of times, just because I know, even though I'm a newer gravel mountain biker, um, that I know that the terrain can also dictate a lot of intervals. So sometimes I would tell you, go for a 2-hour ride, but pick a really, technical, tough course. So you get a lot of those up and downs, or a gravel ride that has some longer hills in it. So I knew what we wanted to accomplish, but we could do that with the terrain and where you live. And then also, your body really well on the bike. So it really wasn't necessary to give you or have the training be bike focused, where
yeah,
a lot of triathletes, that is where they can gain a lot. When you're very bike fit, you have good bike handling skills, good terrain management, that is going to help you so much, not only for the bike but how you run off the bike. So there
yeah,
are certain things that we didn't need to focus on for you so much, but I still wanted to make sure we had that specificity and training. Just because you're a good cyclist doesn't mean that you can't get better. So we
yeah.
wanted to improve cadences, we wanted to improve your thresholds. There's still things that even at your age and experience that we can still tap into.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And, um, I could certainly feel that. I was very pleasantly surprised because in my mind, I hadn't, and again, this is really on my end. I just wasn't giving it as much brain space, even though that you had given me specific things. I'm so used to working on the bike, like it just didn't. I wasn't thinking about it in the same way that I was thinking about the technical training aspects of the running and wondering what you were doing and watching it work, and just it was very cool, like, there was definitely that day, and it was that day that I did that 9-hour ride, and then I had my long run after it with, like,
Yeah.
probably my longest run, and I even had, like, a wreck on the bike, little mishap in the pack and got taken down at speed on gravel and was skinned up, but not beat up, and just felt amazing on the run. That I woke
Yep.
up full of energy and ready to run. I'm like, "I am so ready to go. Now just don't mess it up." I'm
Yep.
like, "Now my job is just to not, like." And it's so like that taper week, it's so hard to be like, because you don't feel great, and you're like, "Don't test your legs, trust the process, don't test it, don't pa," because you don't feel great that taper week. You kinda I don't either. I always feel a little sluggish. It's just not the best feeling, so it was really great to see it come together.
Yeah, and I remember that long bike that you did, and Yeah, when I said, yeah, you can go a little bit longer, and then it was 9 hours. Um, classic. Um, but that's just part of our relationship together, is just knowing, me knowing you and what would work well for you. And then of course, when you did have those adjustments with your training, and when you did have those days where you went longer, then I would just adjust and make sure that it still all made sense for you. But I do remember that run that you did, and your longest run was about an hour 40, hour 45, but it also had a lot of specificity in it. So there was some on intervals that were 10, 15 minutes, and then some easier, and you really nailed it. And that just showed me that you had that resiliency to be able to bounce back from such a arduous ride with a fall, to still be able to take your body to that place where you can show up and execute that run. The other thing too is I knew that the swim and the run took a lot of mental energy for you, because
Yeah.
you were so focused on those and progressing, and then you've got the mental energy of your other tasks in your life. And I still wanted the bike to be a place of freedom and joy. So finding that balance where a lot of the rides were just very unstructured, go ride your
I
bike.
appreciated that.
And then having just a sprinkle of specificity in there. But then it would also be, maybe we don't have the structure on the run. So then the run is just more joyful, enjoy the run.
Yeah, no, I really did appreciate that, and I felt it all. The event itself, the run was definitely slower than I would have preferred it to be. I did burn a few more matches on the bike, knowing that because I was just feeling like I was flying on the bike. It was such an amazing experience, and it was just so much hotter than it had been training up to it. So I had to take it back just enough, but I definitely finished with more in the tank. I could have got I did finish going, you could have run that a little faster." But, but I finished very, very happy. Like, it was a very satisfying, day for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you put it all together and you put in the work. And I think that the run, I think for you, what I think is that it was trying not to go to that place where you didn't want to go to, but then still feeling like you're caring and competitive. And that's a hard place to go into, because I think you do have to be a bit gritty on the run, and to feel like you left it all out there. And
Yeah.
maybe we just need to accept that the run you did was what you needed to do to find that place of happiness and joy, and not emptying the tank, so that you can but still feel that fulfillment at the finish line. So maybe it wasn't necessarily a bad thing that you felt that way. It was just that was what your mind needed to do on that day, so that you could um enjoy, kind of put
That
a good close on this chapter.
that's such a great way to put it. I really appreciate you saying that. I do. I'm almost gonna cry because I feel like I almost felt like that. Oh, I'm letting her down. I should be trying harder out here. But I also was just really enjoying it. Like, I was
Yeah.
just, I was soaking it in a way that I wouldn't have soaked it in if I was in my head more. You know what I mean? So it was more of an external enjoyment of the run than a internal, I should be running faster. Am I doing as good as I had wings for the last mile. I mean, I just was like, oh,
No.
it's all smile. I'm just gonna
Yeah.
it's like you have so much more energy than you're giving. But I wasn't like I didn't finish disappointed. I mean, it
Right.
wasn't that strong. It was just
Yeah.
more of that little voice saying like, you definitely could have run that a little faster, but that's okay. I'm
Yeah.
not, I wasn't out there necessarily to prove all of that.
Yeah.
I could have worked on my transitions too if I wanted to be more fast. My transitions were nothing to write home about. Like, if I really wanted to go for that kind of time, I could have worked on those a little bit more as well. Yeah, and it all, I worked on my nutrition a lot too. We didn't talk about nutrition a ton, and we can talk a little bit about it here as we wrap up, but that has always been something that has been a moving target for me, like to get it right, especially once you get over. I wasn't too worried because I'm usually good within 6 hours, and I knew that this was going to be in that sort of ballpark of a day. Once I get around 8, things get, you got to really, really be careful. But I was very diligent on all of those rides. Like traditionally, Celine in the wintertime would just be like, I don't need to eat on a 3-hour ride or whatever. I'm just not going to do this. But I did. Like I packed my food, I packed my nutrition, and I practiced, practiced, practiced. And it very much paid off.
Yeah, the important thing to me was to keep you that I remind you to stay fueled. And even when you had your big training sessions, I would put a note 2 days out,
Yeah.
make sure you start eating, getting the carbs up, hydrating well, to just make sure that you're paying attention to things that are going to make a positive impact. Let's not worry about the metrics. Let's not worry about outcomes. Let's worry about things that you can control so that you can stay healthy and perform well, and that your body's going to respond well to this training stress. So to me, it was all about just keeping you healthy and nourished and fueled. So those were the reminders that I put into Training Peaks for you, just to make sure you're eating enough. Hey, this was a long workout. Make sure you're eating enough after this workout. So those were just those gentle reminders just to pay attention, make that little extra effort to eat.
And I will say, and I shared this with you, but I think it's important for the audience to hear. My biggest concern is what happened is that we did not have, because with a smoky summer, like it was much cooler here in June than it usually is, and we didn't get many truly hot days
Yeah.
to practice. And the nutrition changes when it's hot. Like my
Yeah.
belly changes when it's hot. And sure enough, it's weekend of July 4th, and it got true Pennsylvania summer for that event. And I had a plan that I had been using, with my hydration mix, in like one more concentrated bottle. Sometimes I could do two concentrated bottles and then water. And I knew in my mind, I'm like, if it gets hot, this is going out the window, or it might go out the window. So
Mhm.
I put those bottles on my bike with a plan B, going, if you start feeling the sensations in your stomach, like it does not like this, you are going to switch horses at the aid station and like grab a bottle of water and grab some Morton gels and just change plans. And that's exactly what I did. Like I got
Okay.
through that high carb bottle and I was pretty good, but I, grabbed the second and I'm like, this isn't going to get me through my day. This isn't working. It's too hot. And then I just grabbed water. I grabbed some of those. I love that they had Morton gels on the course because that's what I like to use. And they had them and it worked beautifully. But I'm only saying this not to you, Marnie, but to people like, it is well worth having an alternate nutrition plan that you can know to switch to. So when you're out there, you're just not like, oh no, here goes this again, my day is shot. And because that can happen to people.
Yeah. Yeah. When it comes, because I do nutrition as well,
Right.
and I'm a board certified sports dietitian. So that is a big focus of mine with athletes. And I'm really glad that you brought that up. First of all, fit athletes are going to do well in the heat, or do better in the heat than unfit. So taking advantage of those 7 months that we had before it got warm was really important to
Mm,
build your fitness, because essentially you will have to bring down the intensity in the heat. So if you've got a higher threshold to work with,
right.
then you're still going to be relatively fast, on race day, even if you have to dial it back. Also, your body's going to acclimate a lot easier. So there's great benefits to really putting in the work in the winter, even though it's not always that much fun and races are so far away and motivation may not be high, but you'll be able to adapt a lot better when it gets warmer. But also with sports nutrition, we just have to remember too that it's good to have a race plan, but it's also good to have different plans. And you get that from experience, and you can get that from experience from racing. You can also get that from training. So I encourage athletes to not get tied to one product, one brand, one flavor. We should all have our favorites. I have my favorites, but I also change things up and get used to different things, so that if one product doesn't work, or it doesn't feel right in that moment, I can deviate, and you have that other product to use. Also, it's important to listen to your body, which you did a great job of. I think athletes will often forget about that. It's like sports nutrition and is delivered on a spreadsheet, which it shouldn't be. You have a plan and guidelines and things that you should stick with, but you also have to listen to your body, especially when you're doing these endurance events. It's all about troubleshooting all day long. That's why endurance events can be more mentally draining than physically, because you're constantly have to be on. Whereas I think in training, a lot of athletes, oh, I like to go for these long rides because I can just kind of zone out. But,
Yeah.
for you, we did a lot, even in your bike rides, we did a lot of intervals in these long workouts. So you had to be on and think about it. So when you get to that race, for 56 miles, you're thinking, how's my stomach? Am I drinking? How's my posture? How's my breathing? You're constantly checking in, then you zone out, and then you check in again, and then you assess that information, and then you deal with it in the best way that you can with the tools in your toolbox. So that's a big part of, training as well, is that you created a lot of tools over the 9 months that we worked together.
Yeah, 100%. And I really, really, again, I think it was such a good relationship, and I really appreciated your coaching. I appreciate your philosophies. I'm very happy that I found somebody who would work with me, like and my ways. Yeah, I sometimes, that's why it is good to talk to different coaches, because there are definitely coaches who are just more metric driven, and they don't really want to work with you if you don't have power numbers. And, I've run into that, and I appreciated that you were willing to work, meet me where I was and take me where I wanted to go, with myself. So thank you for that. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you wanted to, or thought that was interesting, or would like to just leave the audience with?
Well, I think we covered a lot, but I just want to speak to your journey, because and I'll include myself as well, because I've been doing this sport for 16 years, and now I'm deviating to different endurance events. So I see a lot of me and you, and I think some athletes can relate, and some athletes need to be careful with the information that we've given today. And
Okay.
what I mean by that is, when you come from a fitness background such as yourself, with so much racing history, so much training, you live a very active lifestyle, you've got this tremendous base, and then you decide, hey, I want to do a 70.3 or even an Ironman or whatever. Well, then the training can look a little bit different than what coaches may say is a standard approach. Now, it doesn't mean that every athlete should be on the same training plan. But when you're not as experienced, or you're developing, or you're a newer athlete, there's there's a benefit and a great need for structure, and really staying disciplined to the swim, bike, run, and making sure that you're not skipping steps. So your training for an outsider may look like we skipped a lot of steps, in terms of we didn't do testing, we didn't do trainer rides, we didn't do specific brick workouts. There was a lot of different things, but we could do that because you have the experience, you come from this experience, and that allowed you then to be able to deviate in different ways, and be on the gravel bike and the mountain bike and do these 9-hour rides, because I knew that you would be able to bounce back from it. I knew you knew your body well. You took care of yourself, you communicated. So all of these things speak to the veteran athlete that you are. So you came to me with a lot of experience, even though you hadn't done a triathlon in 15 years.
Right.
But for the athletes that I coach that are training for their first 70.3, or they're just in their second or third year of long distance triathlon, while it's good to spice things up and, change things up, I would not say, let's throw in all these mountain bike races and these gravel races if they don't come from that background. I wouldn't say, hey, let's put in, oh, your friends are doing a 7-hour ride, let's do that, because that's skipping steps, and we need
Mm,
to be respectful that the body is not there yet,
yep.
and we have a progression that we need to get to, and that's going to keep you healthy. That's going to allow you to get more out of this journey. So I think that's really important that athletes understand that if you're new to the sport, your training is going to look different to somebody that it's been in the sport for a decade or more. And then also, if you have been in the sport for a long time and you're kind of feeling like you've lost your why, or you're just doing it because it's familiar, maybe it's time to change things up. Maybe it's time to do things differently, to spark that joy, to light that fire, to rediscover that why again. So those are the big takeaways I would give for those who are listening in this chat, to just figure out what camp do you fall into, and then to use that information so that you can stay on your own path.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, because you have brought me back to the arc that I was hoping to take with this, and I had lost the thread in all of our conversations, so I was enjoying it. Is that why? I had mentioned, I'd sort of like was struggling with that, and once I got to this point where I feel amazing, I feel well balanced, I feel like I can feel the water, I feel like a runner. It occurred to me like that was actually my why, and to begin with, is I wanted to get back to feeling that. I wanted to get
Mhm.
back to feeling like a more of a 360-degree athlete, and that was once I got there, I was like, I have already a mission accomplished. Like the rest of this is just icing on this great cake. And that had become my why. And I went out for a run this morning. I'm like, that was my why. I mean, like, I really
Yeah.
enjoy how I feel. I can get in the pool and just really enjoy it. And that was my why. So, finding that why, and I know a lot of people in this audience struggle with it because they've been in it a long time and they hit this
Hmm.
menopause space and their bodies are like doing all these things and then it's not consistent and it
Hmm.
can be frustrating. And that too is where working with a coach can be really helpful, who listens, and you can be like, I
Yeah.
was up all night with hot flashes and night sweats and I feel like this. And you can sort of guide them to be like, okay, well, the most productive thing we can do today is X, and just
Yeah.
keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. Your training, to some may look very unconventional, but it was purposeful for you. And that's what's important for every athlete out there, is to think about, you and your coach need to figure out what's best for you. But you also have to trust it, right? You can't just always, as the athlete, say, this is what I need, right?
Yeah.
You need a coach that understands the physiology, understands the human side of sport. And I feel like we accomplish that. And nothing makes me happier when I coach an athlete is if their journey is over or they no longer need coaching anymore, that they still enjoy the sport. That's very important to me, that they're not selling all their equipment, they're not, ready to give it up, that they finish it and they're like, I still love swim, bike, and run. Maybe I'm not going to race, this next chapter, but I still will follow the sport. I still love the sport. I'm still going to volunteer. I'm still, going to do short distance races, whatever, but they still have a love and a joy for triathlon because it is a really great sport. And I love the sport. I've been in it for a while and I'll stay in it. I'll never stop the swim, bike, and run until my body, won't let me anymore. But in order to do that, I have to constantly find ways to keep myself healthy and to keep that spark alive.
100%. Well, thank you so much
Yeah.
for your time and your wisdom, and we'll drop your information in the show notes so people can check you out. But I really appreciate you. Thank you, Marni.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Going to stop. Well, that's our show. Join me next week when I bring back what has become our resident hormone expert, Dr. Carla DiGirolamo, for a special show on cortisol, one of the most maligned and misunderstood hormones during and beyond this menopause transition. So come on back for that one. And until then, as always, stay feisty. You've been listening to Hit Play, Not Pause, a feisty menopause podcast for active, performance-minded women. I'm your host, Selene Yeager. The show is edited and produced by the strong, talented, and amazing women at Live Feisty Media. Follow us on social media at Feisty Menopause, And please help us spread the word. Screenshot and share this episode on your social media channels with the tag @FeistyMenopause. Share the show with your friends. And please subscribe, like, review, and rate this show wherever you get your podcasts. Word of mouth and good reviews make it easier for other listeners to find. Thanks for listening, and as always, stay feisty.